Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Let me check my mic. It's late, 12:51 in the morning. When it's late or early in the morning, I do what real men do. I do the news. This one is not really going to be the news though. In fact, this one could have been a 420. There's a video by Chomsky. There's several news articles that I want to do that I didn't get to today or prior day that I'm probably going to do tonight. So I may be in for the next hour or so. But that said, before I get to any of that, let's have some fun. So there are two topics that I want to hit. One is going to be on Chomsky. That's this one. There's another one that I myself want to hit, dealing with something that Jerry Beck and I talked about. There's one I want to hit with Sanders, and there's one I want to talk about in regards to actual news stories. Look, first, let me say thank you to everyone who helps this channel. I am not the best at human interaction. And I said that weird. I'm not the best at people in entanglements, let's say it that way. So, it's like, I do the news, I enjoy doing the news, and I enjoy engaging with my audience as I do the news. And Twitter and everything else, the other stuff I tend to be not that great at. Not to mention there's other stuff in life that I have to also balance and maintain. That being said, I don't want you to think I'm not listening. Mic has changed. I think this one works. I can justify this expense because when I go traveling, I'm going to need a mic when I travel. Some of the technology I'm trying to change, some of the technology I'm using. So, look, I just want to say thank you. Whether you like the content, whether you share, whether you, like send it on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Thank you very much. Even if you send articles, thank you very much. I appreciate all of the help with the channel. So Chomsky, debunking Chomsky. Now, I'm saying debunking Chomsky. I'm saying that kind of as this grand goal that I may not in any way hit, may not in any way touch, may not in any way even come close to, but I'm going to try. I'm not even sure if I fully agree with my argument, but I don't necessarily think I fully agree with Chomsky's. So let's hash it out. Let's see where it lands. I don't think anybody is going to watch this, so, doesn't matter if I fall flat. Noam Chomsky is making an argument about moral relativism, essentially making the case that this idea of moral relativism, there are no moral relativists, that there are innate structures in the human being that it's almost like code built into what the person is to some degree that is a representation of morality. The morality is almost inherent. It's ingrained or innate into the human being. That's the way I understood what Chomsky was saying. I'm going to play it and let you hear it for yourself. But I want to talk about this. I could be wrong on this. I don't think Chomsky knows this as a flat fact. I think Chomsky is making his understanding of this stuff here, making his case. If I'm ever so bold, I want to make my own case after this. That morality is not innate. That this stuff can be explained through advantageous behavior. Meaning, it's not necessarily something that's internal. It's an external thing that's taking place. But the interpretation to some degree is being considered to be morality. I don't necessarily know if it exists in the way that Chomsky is saying. So, let's hear... I listen to Noam Chomsky every night so I can fall asleep. If that doesn't work, I listen to Sam Cedar. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Mike is super loud. Oh, good. Everyone was complaining it wasn't loud enough. Alright. Perfect. Mike is super loud. That's a good thing. So let's hear Chomsky do its thing. Hopefully he doesn't put what's his name to sleep. But I'm not going to play a lot of this. I'm just going to play it up to the point where I think it makes... Okay, maybe I will turn this mic down because I'm seeing this hitting red every time. Alright, I'll turn it down. Every time I say something, it goes to like top notch. Alright, so let's put this down at 85, and hopefully that's right. Alright, so let's hear Chomsky Chomsky's going to do his thing. Chomsky is Chomsky. I tend to love him. I know he's mild-mannered. He talks softly. Moral relativism, whether or not it exists. I find this subject fascinating because I think it kind of touched on kind of what Jared Beck and I were saying. But let's let Chomsky make his case.
But no human being can, in fact, be a skeptic. They wouldn't survive for 2 minutes if they were, so they're not. And I think pretty much the same is true of relativism. It's a little difficult to discuss. It's a little bit like discussing skepticism. There are no skeptics. You can discuss it in a philosophy seminar, but no human being can, in fact, be a skeptic. They wouldn't survive for 2 minutes if they were, so they're not. And I think pretty much the same is true of moral relativism. There are no moral relativists. There are people who profess it. You can discuss it abstractly, but it doesn't exist in ordinary life. And to sharpen the discussion a little, we should recognize that the concept moral relativism ranges over quite a broad spectrum. So there's a form of moral relativism which is totally uncontroversial. Of course it's true. There are, as to quote this, there are ethical norms that vary widely over space and time. I mean, that's just an observation of fact. Nobody denies that. Similarly, every other aspect of humans varies quite widely. So, for example, human visual systems can vary quite widely in the way they function, depending on early experience. Actually, it's been shown by experiment, not with humans, but with other animals with essentially the same visual system, that you can change them radically just by early experience. Every biological system, and I assume we're biological organisms, so our moral values and ethical systems are also biological systems. Every one of them can vary quite widely depending on experience. That's not controversial. So, for example, the human visual system can be varied experimentally so that it will have different distributions of receptors that respond to horizontal and vertical lines, and that'll give very different perception. You can show it with cats and monkeys. We have the same visual system. On the other hand, you can't turn a human visual system into an insect visual system as you change experience. And this is quite general across the biological domain, including moral systems. There's a range of options that's possible. There's variation within that range, but there are also limits to the range. And in fact, this takes us to there's a tendency to move from the uncontroversial concept of moral relativism to a concept that is, in fact, incoherent. And that's to say that moral values can range indefinitely. That belief, which is held, is literally incoherent. It's based on the assumption that moral values reflect culture. But then that raises the next question: how does a person acquire that his or her culture? I mean, you don't get it by taking a pill. You get your culture, you acquire your culture by observing a rather limited number of behaviors and actions, and from those constructing somehow in your mind the set of attitudes and beliefs that constitute your culture. But that act is very much like learning a language, or like developing a visual system, or in fact like finding a scientific theory. It's a matter of making a great leap from scattered data to some outcome. And that leap is made essentially the same way by all individuals, given relatively fixed experience. And it's only possible if you have extensive built-in innate structure, just as you can develop a human rather than an insect visual system only if it's guided by genetic instructions, very specific ones. The same is true of acquisition of language, of acquisition of arithmetical capacity, acquisition of a culture, hence acquisition of moral values. But that means that the most extreme form of moral relativism is actually committed to the belief in universal values, namely those that set the frame in which this tremendous leap from data, scattered data, to a complex, relatively fixed system can take place. That's why the extreme version of moral relativism, which is common, and I think Foucault professed it, is simply incoherent. If you adopt that position, you are committed to far-reaching universal values and their existence. Those that, just as if you are studying the visual system and you discover that it can vary over a wide range, you're nevertheless, in fact, by that very fact, committed to the belief that there are fixed, innate, genetically determined constraints that set the framework in which it can develop and that sort of guide the development of the structure, even though allowing a certain degree of variation. And in fact, I think that I won't talk about postmodernism, that's beyond my capacity to discuss, but just keep the postmodernism, which at least has the merit of being incoherent. I'm not sure that postmodernism even reaches that far, but it reminds me of a famous comment of a physicist, Wolfgang Pauli, who was apparently a pretty acid person and used to say sometimes when someone proposed something, that's not even false. You didn't get that far. But take these examples, slavery, subjugation of women, repression of homosexuals, and let's forget about a variety of cultures. Just think about our own. In our own culture, not that far back, these were all perfectly accepted norms. So take, say, repression of homosexuals. One of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, Alan Turing, who also was a war hero in Britain. He's one of the people who really saved Britain from the German assault. He was instrumental in developing the techniques that decoded German signals, so the British were able to determine where the bombers were going to hit, and so on and so forth. He was killed by the British government by a forced treatment to cure his disease of homosexuality. Well, that wasn't that long ago. I mean, that was when I was a graduate student. It doesn't seem very long ago to me. That's inconceivable now, totally inconceivable. Moral values have advanced. I would say that what it means is that we have penetrated more deeply into our own actual moral values and seen, as the moral sphere extends, that some things that were considered completely normal and admirable are so atrocious you can't even think about them. And the same is true of slavery. Subjugation of women is very recently overcome, a long way to go yet, but changed dramatically in the last 30, 40 years. As I mentioned, beginning just with consciousness-raising groups that brought women to recognize that what they took to be normal and necessary and even acceptable is in fact completely should be totally rejected. Okay, that's the same thing, widening of the moral sphere. The same is true of slavery, a little bit earlier. There still are slaves, estimated 30 million or so in the world, but it's regarded as reprehensible and totally unacceptable. And in fact, if you look at the history of overcoming of slavery in the West, it was substantially moral arguments. Incidentally, it's not that the slave owners had no arguments. They did, and it's worth attending to those arguments. In fact, some of them really have never been answered. And the fact that they're not answered gives us some insight. It's always, in fact, in general, contrary to the views of the extreme moral relativists, moral disagreements can be debated. You don't just have to scream at each other. You can look at the arguments, try to find some common ground, work from the common ground and try to reach a conclusion. That's a moral interchange, and it's often successful. So take slavery. One of the arguments during the American Civil War of the slave owners, which is a serious argument, is that they argued that they are more moral than northern industrialists for a very simple reason. They own their workers, and therefore they take care of them. Just as if you own a car, you'll take care of it. Northern industrialists rent their workers, and they don't take care of them. They have no responsibility for them. Just as if you rent a car, you probably won't take care of it. So therefore, slavery is more moral than a capitalist industrial policy. Actually, I think there's some merit to that argument. But instead of concluding from it that slavery is legitimate, we should conclude what working people in the North in the century and a half ago, we should draw their conclusion. It was a very common belief among working people in the United States that wage labor is fundamentally no different from slavery. The only difference is it's temporary. In fact, that was such a popular view that it was a slogan of the Republican Party. It was Abraham Lincoln's view.
Think of how things have changed. That is not the Republican Party now. But you get his point. This idea that morality is somehow inherent. That it's not an external thing. There are structures within the person that tends to trend towards morality. A few things. If you were in the wilderness, or if you were just in a normal day, and this argument doesn't fully work, but it works under normal circumstances if you weren't necessarily plugged into anything. If you were unplugged, you wouldn't witness, let me say it this way. If you were in some country that is somewhat unplugged, you wouldn't come across relativity either, but it's real. Meaning, the faster you go, getting to this kind of relativistic speeds. Noam Chomsky was making the point that you don't see more relativism in regular life. I'm saying that there are plenty of things that you don't come across in everyday normal life that exists. That's the first point. The second point, he makes this thing of we have a limited view of behaviors, or we're seeing a limited thing of behaviors, and we're taking this disparate information and we're coming to this idea, we're making leaps, kind of like science, that, you know, it's like, where did morality come from? Okay, morality came from culture. Where did culture come from? That type of stuff. And I don't necessarily dislike that. And in fact, I would even go there. Let's have that conversation. Let's have it from there. Let's start from there, in fact, because I think this kind of goes against what Chomsky is saying here. If he thinks it all the way through, and maybe he did, maybe I'm wrong on this, but fuck it, let's do it. Let's start here. If there's no God, there's no point. Now, meaning, if there is no God, there is no point. There's no purpose. It's like if a person built a hammer. They built a hammer with the whole point of hammering, or I have this ink pen with the idea of writing, or stabbing somebody in the eye if somebody tried to break into the room and try to attack my wife or myself. But a human being. Who made a human being? If there is no God, there is no point. Meaning a person is somewhat radically free to be what that person is going to be. So God is taken off the table in these type of discussions. The second point that I want to hit at, and to be fair to Chomsky, God wasn't brought into it, but this idea of built-in structures, this idea of and look, even some of this I agree with him on. Like, so the first part that he's saying, I agree with all that. That culturally we are kind of raised to have certain ideas of our world and everything else from our culture. Those things are built into us, implicit, explicit experience. Our society, for the most part, makes us in large part who we are, whether we're pushing against the society or whether we're accepting the agreements that the society put forth. Agreed. Agreed. Now the question becomes the structures and whether or not that morality per se that he's talking about is internal, or if it's some kind of external process that Chomsky is looking at and is considering is internal. Now at one point, I agree that they're motor neurons or mirror neurons, things in our heads that reflect what's taking place on the outside of us. So if you're a reflecting area of trust, peace, and love, then people may be hippies. In a situation where there's riots and chaos, people kind of flip out and take on the behaviors of the people that are around them. But that's not morality. That's not morality. Chomsky is trying to get at something different. This thing that Martin Luther King makes, the arc of history is long and it bends towards fairness. Now, the catch in that is kind of what Chomsky is getting at, that the arc of history, one thing after the next, women's rights, African Americans' rights, slavery, all of these things fell by the wayside as society moved into a different direction. The arc of history is long, but it bends towards fairness. Well, fairness in this case, I would make the case, is justice. Justice goes back to that other saying, no justice, no peace. People use that saying as somewhat of a refrain, but that refrain is more true than I think people realize. Going back to the time when people were first, let's say, evolving or whatever, you can look back and think of one change, one thing that a person needed to do, and that person needed to get their needs met. I need to find food, clothing, shelter, and something in order to make sure I can live and survive. And you would imagine that people in the beginning were just living on the edges, surviving. Cavemen, whatever that, I don't know the names, the Cro-Magnon man and all this other stuff. But you can understand that in the same way that we live our lives where we're taking on the traits of our families and we take on the traits of their families and their families and their families going all the way back with permutations in the societies themselves and permutations in us and things that we accept. Those things create arcs. Now, going back to this idea of where did culture come from, I will argue that culture came from things that they had to do to get by and survive. Meaning behaviors that were more advantageous than other behaviors. That it wasn't necessarily this thing of I am moral. There were certain behavioral traits that allowed me and the people who were around my group, my tribe, to survive as opposed to not. I would argue individualism probably got people killed. There was something, a bear, a lion, that ate those people who wanted to be individuals as opposed to people who wanted to function at the behest of the group. I would argue that the collective idea that Chomsky is talking about is morality, this working towards other people of the group, or what he would consider to be culture, was essentially created just from the very act of survival in the beginning, with one change after the next in regards to tools and technologies and understanding, leading to permutations in the way that society or those people evolved. The intermeshing of that, the smashing together of all these different cultures in the way that all of these different cultures were trying to survive, those are the things that essentially have come up to be the world that we have today. In the same way that I raised my family, and it's going to be some extension of the way I was raised, which was some extension of the way my mom was raised, which is some extension of the way that their parents were raised. That trend continues. It's just one long line of changes and permutations. The thing is, when you get to this thing of culture, though, I kind of want to nail home this point that what Chomsky is talking about is where did culture come from? Where did this stuff come from? I would argue those things came from just the basics of survival in a group when those civilizations were first created. And they were passing those things on as traits, understandings, lessons, things that you needed to know to survive and live, or at the very least things that they needed to know to survive and live. It wasn't magic. It's not something that's necessarily ingrained or built into you. Yes, you may have certain structures that allow you to kind of, this little bit of code that allow you to spit out who you're going to be. But that will change radically depending upon the societies that you're in. If I was born in South Sudan in the middle of a war zone and sold off as a child into this kind of bondage where I was told in a military childhood where I had to kill my own parents, what kind of person would I be? As opposed to sold, with somebody who's an abusive parents, as opposed to living on Vulcan, as opposed to living in ancient Japan. Those things are radically different. The temperaments of those people are radically different. And who I would be changed radically different. I'm just trying to make this point that this idea of morality is not necessarily ingrained. Those things are societal traits. And the way Chomsky is talking about as this being this kind of ingrained thing is just items that were learned and passed on through ancient generations. human beings, this arc of history thing, this direction, the reason we go in a particular direction is because there's certain agitating factors throughout society that push and agitate. We, society, is just like a person. For all intents and purposes, I would argue that society is just an extension of a human being. Media is our eyes, our ability to get things done as a collective is, for the most part, our will in our hands. Well, people don't like pain. And this idea of chaos is pain. No justice is pain. When you have people picketing, when you have crime, when you have people, blowing stuff up, setting things on fire, setting themselves on fire, wars, those things are pain. Those things are chaos. I would argue in the same way that people scratch and itch and try to move towards less pain, society tries to move towards less chaos. That's not the hallmark of morality. That's the hallmark of people trying to move towards less chaos. There's a difference in those things. You may enshrine certain traits and cultural beliefs and cultural ideas and everything else, and you may consider those things to be morality, but those things are just things that were learned and passed on as ways to go about your way. If I sign a treaty with Russia, and I say I'm not going to put weapons in space, why am I doing that? You ever thought about that? Why did they do that? Why are they signing a treaty to get rid of nuclear weapons? Why are they signing a treaty not to use chemical weapons? They're doing that stuff because they look at it as, look, I don't want to spend a ton of money putting weapons in space. Now, if you don't spend a ton of money putting weapons in space, and I don't have to worry about putting weapons in space, then both of us can at the very least agree that no weapons in space. That is a deal that we're making. That is not the countries being moral. Those are the countries working in their best interests. I would argue that each of these events, be it slavery, be it women's rights, or workers' rights, kind of fall under the same thing. The North had industry. They didn't need slavery in this way. And the arguments that were being made from the standpoint of getting rid of slavery, do you really want your workers competing with slaves? I understand that there will be some people who internalize these ideas that are passed in from the standpoint of these cultural ideas, in which case they would not like slavery because they would look at this stuff as being, okay, this is this is not right, this is dishonest and everything else. Those are cultural ideas, however, that were internalized to the individual. But again, those cultural ideas, I would make the case, came from those cultures or the early origins of those cultures. All of these things, none of these things per se, are issues of morality. All of these things are issues of a society trying to be in less pain. It's society moving in a particular way. The arc of history is long. It's been towards fairness. And in this case, fairness, justice, is less pain, less chaos, less picketing, less bombings, less people standing outside being, obtuse, less people showing signs and flying Trump babies, less chaos. Your society moves towards less chaos. I'm making a case here that it's not that morality is internal or inherent. Morality, to some degree, is emergent. I would even argue it doesn't exist at all. Ultimately, those things are cultural phenomena, cultural artifacts. They're good cultural artifacts, especially since they are advantageous. They are environmentally advantageous. My safety is ensured when you're safe, and vice versa. In the same way that I say, hey, let's cut down on the amount of nuclear missiles because I am safer when you have less nuclear missiles, and I make the same decision. In the same way that they are safer when I don't have weapons in space, I'm safer when they don't have weapons in space. That's not an issue of morality. I'm making a point that many of these things can fall under the same umbrella of these unconscious, non-explicit agreements that people make that we consider to be culture. And in these non-explicit agreements that we make that we consider to be culture, we find ways of less chaos. That's what I think. That's my argument. I think that is just as valid as this idea of internal morality per se. This stuff is learned. This stuff is learned. Let's see. Who's here? And let's see if I made the argument. Chomsky, as an anarchist, refuses to count Lenin or Trotsky at all, but Chomsky is clearly proven wrong on Trotsky's work, their morals and ours. Yeah, I've heard he doesn't like, I've heard him go after somebody for the Lenin thing. Give alcohol to minors and you get Trotsky. Give alcohol to minors and you get Trotsky situation. Trotsky situation. Cynical optimist. The morality of slaveholders and the morality of slaves in bondage are not equal. Lenin, Trotsky, and said light. Chomsky's view collapse. The morality of slaveholder and the morality of slave in bondage are not equal. Lenin, Trotsky. In said light, Chomsky views collapse. See, this is why I don't like this thing of morality. Like, cause and effect is a little bit easier to ascertain. There are things that we can say are moral, but those things are based on our societal touchstones, if that makes sense. That woman is wearing earrings. How dare that woman wear earrings? God damn it, that woman is so immoral. Well, that's nonsense. She can wear whatever she wants. In their culture, that's immoral. That woman is not wearing a head wrap. That guy is smoking a joint. That guy has his pants hanging down. That woman is not wearing a bra. None of that stuff is real. Stuff is nonsense. That woman can't show her nipples. Why not? That woman is breastfeeding. How dare she? Those things are cultural. All of them are nonsense. You, as a human being, is real. Skin tone, skin color, yeah, that may be real. Everything else is a cultural overlay, and it's not. That's kind of my point. Balthazar, they signed treaties because Superman 4 tells... Oh God, we got to do that video. The morality of that movie. Fucking A, man. I was looking for a good 420. That's a good one. Should Superman have gotten rid of the missiles? Good one, Balthazar. I'm not going to break this yet, but Superman getting rid of the missiles is a good one. Make America Great Again hat can be worn anywhere. Even that. Even that. I mean, granted, there's a little bit more to it, but yes. Robert Pouquet-Ray, some morals, I think, some come from an understanding of what would hurt and judge of morality, the golden rule approaches. Well, look, I think also, again, this is one of those things where, but why the golden rule? Why? You ever asked the question why? It's not because it's moral, it's because those things can be applied to you. Your safety is only assured if my safety is assured. If killing is perfectly okay, then I can kill you and take your stuff at any time. If we make an agreement that killing is not okay, then at the very least we can go about our affairs. We, at the very least, agree that we don't kill, we want to persist. That's a golden rule because it's one of those things that apply to everybody. Safety is ensured only when other people's safety is ensured. That's just kind of what I'm getting at. A lot of this stuff can be boiled down to advantage, self-interest. It's almost like esteemed self-interest that gets so enshrined into cultural narratives that it becomes sacrosanct as morality. But it's a difference, meaning there needs to be an understanding that there is a distinction between the morality itself is coming from these kind of cultural touchstones versus some kind of absolute. If human beings blink out of existence, nobody would care. There will be nothing to wink for us. It wouldn't be right or wrong. And the fact that it wouldn't be right or wrong kind of blows this hole in this idea of morality, because there will be no human being there, no consciousness there to judge it as right or wrong. It takes a consciousness there to make that judgment and determination of right and wrong. In regards to this idea of right and wrong, that again also becomes somewhat of a cultural touchstone. That cultural touchstone, I am making the case, boils down more so, not to something that's ingrained, but more so something that's learned. And it's learned to some degree because we understand almost in this kind of flesh to bone way that if it's perfectly okay to knock people off, then it's perfectly okay for me to be knocked off. If we want to persist, at the very least we need a certain basic rule set to which allows us to persist. This is somewhat self-interest. This is less to do with morality and more to do with self-interest. That's my argument anyway. I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong. Football player injuries might be another example of how some may say the adored game is abhorrent. Yeah, the head injuries. Saying I'm going to keep this one short at the start of a 2-hour video is immoral. Right. There you go, Luca. There's one. This video is going to be short, and then 2 hours later, I thought he said he was going to keep this one short. This is fucking horrendous. I'm not going to take this anymore. Yeah, Luca. Yeah, Luca. Trina will be fine. Do unto others. Trina will be fine, but that's kind of my point. Why do you think that's moral? Why? Why? Now, most people would say, well, because it is. I'm saying, you think it is because your culture has driven into you from the time you were a toddler that it was. Right or wrong doesn't exist. Morality of a concentration camp guard is only one generation away from any potential society. Morality is in constant flux. Yes. This is normal for you, Jamal. Shanriha. Why do communists struggle with the concept of morality? Yin, yang, light side of dark side. You know what? It's funny. I am Solar. I'm agreeing with you on this. I'm going to agree with you on this. Because my next video is going to absolutely agree with you on this. But I think you're going to hate where I go with it. There is no such thing as right or wrong. It doesn't exist. It's something that right-wingers understand. Right-wingers care about stuff when it adversely affects them. They don't care about it when it doesn't affect them. They're able to operate in a different space because they don't care about the idea of right or wrong. Their concept of right or wrong is different than what you consider to be right or wrong. Yours is based on this idea of morality and good and bad and all this other stuff. This idea of weakness, the strong versus the weak, these type of themes, these types of narratives. The thing in my head that goes off when I think justice is afoot. I get turned on by justice. Oh, look at that justice. I love it. I'm a lefty. No, I am that way, however, because of the things, external and internal experiences that I've had that drill that stuff in me, along with the little bit of workable code in me that kind of, accrues to certain things. That could be, but that's, again, that's the thing of upbringing. I don't fully believe that people are robots. So I don't fully buy this very particular argument because this argument to some degree depends on this idea that people are robots. But I think the argument is better than Chomsky's, if I'm being honest. Now, I'm biased because I'm saying the argument. I agree ultimately there is no right or wrong. I'm with you on that. Look at psychopaths. Yeah, from a standpoint of a psychopath, they don't see this idea of right or wrong. In fact, they don't even have the idea of right or wrong. Something takes place, it's just something took place. Is what it is. Do animals have morality? No. No, they don't. They have advantageous behavior or less advantageous behavior. I'm making a point that the permutations in human behavior that have taken place over the course of X amount of time that have moved into the degree of fairness have been, all intents and purposes, fits and starts, but ultimately moving in the direction of less chaos. That's been interpreted as morality. Love is the answer. Yes, love is the answer. Love is the answer. Society has a bias towards reality, has a bias. Well, that's not right to say. Reality doesn't have a bias. Complexity has a bias towards cooperation and love. Agreed. Think about your body for a moment. All of the cells in your body have to work together. All of the atoms have to work together in order to make the cells. All of the organs have to work together and even to make the body. And you as an individual need to work within a larger framework in order to get anything done. You can build a house by yourself. You can build a fucking society with the help of a lot of other people. Society or complexity demands cooperation. You can say the same thing about stars and planets and galaxies, and if you want to say a multiverse and everything else. But love is the answer. Love is the answer. Agreed. All right, I'm going to end this. I have another one that I want to do. Empathy, yeah. You know, it's funny. When people have their near-death experiences, oftentimes when they come back, a lot of the times they say love. More love. I agree with them. I fail at it, but I agree with them. All right, I'm going to end this. I have another one that I want to do immediately after this, so I'll see you guys in like 3 minutes. Okay, my time is off. It's usually fucked up, so let's say 5. I'll see you guys shortly. Thanks, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, as always, Patreon. Abe saying altruism is biologically selfish. Yes, yes, yes. That's what I'm getting at. Yes. You're saying it in a bougie way, sir, but yes. Yes. Altruism is biologically selfish. Yes. And it's funny, that's going to lead into my next piece. So, yeah, agreed. Jamal is wrong on this one. Uh-oh, Pat! Jamal is wrong on this one. Why am I wrong, Pat? Then how do you explain an animal of one species nurturing an orphan of another species? How is that advantageous? That's a good point. That's a good point. I can't answer that. I mean, my argument was based on humanity, not necessarily based on animals. Maybe they're mistaking them for their own cubs. I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm talking more about the agitations in humanity itself. I can't speak on animals. Because this idea of animal morality, I don't know what that means from the standpoint of an animal. A snake is always going to eat a chicken if it gets the opportunity. Is the snake bad? No. The snake is eating the chicken because the snake is hungry. It needs to eat. The chicken is going to try to get away because the chicken wants to get away and wants to live. Neither one of the parties are bad or wrong in that situation. As a human being, you can say, well, that snake is bad because that snake is trying to eat that chicken. Not so much. What about us? My wife was, we were in Iceland. It was when we got married. And we're walking through, it's this kind of, this area. I can't think of the name of it, but it's gorgeous. It was a really nice area. And there was a lot of people, pedestrians, and there were like a waterway. And there were ducks, geese. Now, the ducks had baby ducks behind them. And so the mother duck was kind of going along the way. And she had like 4 ducks or baby ducks behind them. Babies, like baby ducks. And there was a swan nearby. And the swan looked like it was minding its own business. And everybody's just kind of like, oh, you know, this gorgeous weather for Iceland. The world is good. There's no harm in the world. And one of the swans flew up, grabbed one of the babies, and flew off and started eating it. The audience was horrified. Everybody that was there, like, literally gasped, like, oh! Like, it was a shocking thing to see. It literally shocked the shit out of everybody there. I don't care who you were, it blew you away because this scene that was picturesque was broken by this level of violence, by the swan that rudely and brutally, criminally ate the baby duck that was minding his business. My wife was pissed. She was pissed. She was like, people were trying to hit the swan. They tried to get it to release it and everything else. And she was like, that goddamn swan, man. Those things are fucking horrible. I hate those things. She hated the swan. Hated the swan. It didn't stop her from eating a hamburger. Now, was the swan right for what the swan did, or was it wrong? Well, neither. The swan wanted to eat. The swan ate. There was no morality built into the process. The swan was just doing what the swan needed to do in order to survive. The swan didn't have anybody to, you know, fix it like a hamburger like my wife was going to get. So there wasn't a chef, which the swan had a middleman where he didn't have to actually do the dirty work of killing it. So I'm just saying the morality thing of animals. I don't know what it means from the standpoint of an animal. An animal does things because it needs to do things, not necessarily because it's being punitive or dickish about it. That's all. I mean, I feel you. But again, I could be wrong on this. I'm not, you know. Yo, Jamal, what do you do during the day for work? I do this for work at this point. Birds eat birds sometimes. Yes, they do. Cynical optimist. There is no selfishness in altruism. Humanity is a whole whose sole purpose is a continuation and expansion of our species. If it's between the belief of Ayn Rand, I'll take Hannah Arendt any day. Yeah, the Ayn Rand thing is weird. Look, the problem with this kind of libertarian thought process, I don't like having conversations about this idea of capitalism, libertarianism, social. I don't like those arguments. Ultimately, what do you want to accomplish and what do you want to see in the world? And I understand that people may use a particular lens in order to answer that question, but what do you want to see in the world? Now, if you're telling me that you have this libertarian idea where the 1% can do whatever they want, or the top or the rich can do whatever they want and run roughshod over everybody else, and this is somehow great to live, I think you're insane. And beyond that, whether we or not we agree on what the world is, meaning somebody can take this kind of perspective of fuck everybody else, I'm going to be a Superman and if I can run roughshod over everybody, that's what I'm going to do. If the laws allow it, if the people are stupid enough to allow it, I'm going to do it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm a capitalist. Now, the thing is, if that capitalist is engaging in behavior that is going to get everybody killed because they're destroying the environment because they don't take into account the environmental calamity of what they're doing, then their understanding or their philosophy fails. It fails a litmus test. While we can make a case that there is no purpose, meaning if a human being blinks out of existence, then it doesn't really matter. Fair enough. But if we're talking about some kind of political philosophy, I would hope that the goal of any political philosophy is not nihilism, and that it is to try to persist itself. And if you're telling me that your political philosophy allows for people to do what they want, as in the way that we have our capitalistic system structured now, well, fucking gonna hit a rock. There's an asteroid that's gonna hit the planet. These capitalists, we're hearing that the ice sheets may not come back, that it's melting in the Arctic. And their response, and many of them was, hey, that's great, we can get to the oil beneath the ice sheets. Forget the fact that the oceans are rising. Forget the fact that the jet stream isn't even shutting down. Sperm counts have dropped. The quality and nutrition of our foods have dropped because of the carbon content in the air. Like, I'm trying to get across to you the calamity that's being created based upon the economic system to which we organize ourselves in a political system that's completely feckless and feloniously inept in dealing with it. If that's the society and the reality that the person wants, then I would say that it fails on its face. It fails on its face. It ate the chickens because they didn't cross the road. Is that what? Dax Jacobson, humans are animals that some joke. Humans are animals that some joker thought would make good slaves and upgrades us to be able to talk and follow orders. It's been downhill since then. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I disagree with Chomsky on. Like, look, I know some of the arguments that was made for slavery were made through moralistic terms, but the moralistic terms in and of themselves weren't going to be enough to sway getting rid of this slave thing. Slavery just wasn't necessary in the North. Yes, the war was fought over slavery from the standpoint of the South. Well, the war was fought over slavery. The North said, get rid of it. They didn't want to do it. States' rights. A state's right to do what? A state right to do what? To hold slaves. Those things, I guess I'm just trying to make this point. This stuff, I don't believe this stuff is inherent. I don't believe this stuff is inherent. I'm throwing animals into the morality discussion is very interesting. Yeah. Because, look, for the human beings are odd sorts. Not necessarily completely unique. Because what we feel and experience and everything else, animals do too. Animals, they love their kin. They love their pack or whatever. They're scared, lonely, they get hungry. All of these things. They have these emotions just like we have these emotions. It's criminal. Like, and let's go into the morality thing. Even that. We allow the widespread torture of animals just for eating. It's not necessary. We do it because we like it. We like the taste. There's nothing more insignificant than taste, and yet we like the taste of animals, so we're willing to keep them in cages. Now, the moment that they comes up with a meat substitute, we may change, but the change is not going to be because of the animal's welfare. It's going to be because if there was a substitute that could replace it. That's kind of what I mean. It's not purely a moral thing. A lot of this stuff is built on emergent properties of a particular society that either allows or disallows certain behaviors. But that's my pitch. That's my pitch. I could be wrong on this again. I could be totally wrong. Chomsky was very wrong about 9/11. Chomsky is a gatekeeping Jew. Oh, Jesus Christ. That's a little brutal. Trudy, and animal expressions match human ones. Joy, fear, etc. Look, yeah, yes. Like right there, that argument by itself. Why is eating animals okay? I got to be honest, I don't understand it. I eat them and I don't understand the answer to it. I feel bad about doing it. And yet I do it. Why is eating animals okay? This is kind of my point about the morality thing. Chomsky and Kissinger both need to retire and quit meddling in with our future and future of our children. Melinda Ann Burns, which Chomsky is amazing. What do you mean Chomsky needs to retire? Chomsky is amazing. I'm just picking on one thing that Chomsky is saying. And I don't even know if I'm right on this thing. Because they fucking taste delicious. Yeah, pretty much. Side yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. I'm not talking about the American slave, but all humans. We were slightly upgraded animals by taking skill added so we could follow orders, and some aliens pick that up and move it over there. I love that, because suffering is delicious. Speaking of suffering is delicious, you know, some of the cows in Japan, the Kobe cows, they massage the cows. They feed the cows beer, and they give the cow massages. Those cows have an amazing life. I saw a monkey go nuts for unequal pay. That's hilarious. Abe Sand, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I saw a monkey go nuts for unequal pay. Crows teach each other things. Check out crows vids on YouTube's. Yeah, animals in general teach each other things. I mean, for example, a bear will learn from another bear to open a bag that a person has in their car. A bear may learn from another bear to open a car door. It's all sorts of stuff that animals teach each other with. But again, Chomsky may look at this and say, this is morality. This is inbuilt. I look at that and say, those are small, minute changes that they're picking up from the environment where they can learn and they can pass on. In bear culture, if bears had the capacity to talk, bears may tell each other certain things that were advantageous to bears. Well, we're just a special kind of bear. On a more humorous note, I can't help but think of the morality of Marvel characters like Ultron and Apocalypse. In many ways, what both those villains said make great points. Or the Joker. Or the Joker. One of the best and fascinating things about the Joker is what he was saying about Batman was true. Essentially, you went outside the bounds of society because you realized that at the end of the day, they're not going to do anything. Now, here's the thing. In most cases, even in cases of wars, the society, the population, a conquered population, most of them don't resist. You get a small faction of malcontents. But that's also true in just our society. In other societies, you get a small selection of malcontents that agitate and push for social change. Balthazar, do not wrestle with Putin, bear to another bear. Oh, God. That's hilarious to me. That's hilarious to me. That is hilarious to me. I have this image in my head of Putin wrestling a bear. That's hilarious to me. That's amazing advice, Balthazar. One bear telling another bear, don't wrestle Vladimir. Leave Vladimir to his devices. Leave Vladimir to his devices. Oh, man, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. How can Batman not fight crime and not be part of the city's payroll? Batman is a millionaire. He doesn't need the city's payroll. He has this idea in his head on what he wants the world to be. What Batman didn't realize, however, is that Batman is somewhat of an antigen or an irritant, in that in order to keep balance, there is going to be something, some small percentage, that challenges him. And at some point, odds are, there's going to be one that challenges him significantly. Well, you got him. The Joker. You got him. Batman loves order where the Joker loves chaos. And ridicules society. Consistently ridicules society. The thing that you wear over you is just a mask. That's all it is. That underneath is chaos and rage. And the wild part about this is the Joker is right. Morality is emergent. Or at the very least, what we consider to be morality is somewhat emergent. The Joker is making the point that it is not inherent to who you are. It is based purely on the society to which you exist. And if you strip away the luxuries of that society, you would evolve in the chaos, which is the mask and the real face of society. Joker is an amazing character. He's an utterly amazing character. Superheroes create villains. Yeah, to some degree. To some degree. It's like the balancing of a force or something. All right, I'm going to end this. This is a fascinating conversation. But I do want to get to the other video, and it's like 1:46 in the morning, and I haven't necessarily been in bed yet. So I definitely want to get to... Yeah, I'm still running from yesterday. So my steam is running low. But that being said, I want to get to at least two other videos, and I want to get to some of the stuff that's been taking place across the pond because it's fascinating. Theresa May. Zombie. Theresa May. Dead Prime Minister walking. And I just mean that in a political sense. So I'm going to end this here. Balthazar, I have Streamlabs. My issue with Streamlabs, Balthazar, I tried to use it earlier. I'm having trouble with some of the screens. I haven't necessarily familiarized myself completely with the streams. And so it's screwing with when I try to flip between this. I'll figure it out. But you're right. I like it. It's decent. It has all sorts of widgets that we can add to the process. So Balthazar has given me the hint of Streamlabs. He's given me the hint strongly multiple times. I checked it out. I do like it. And it is something I'm going to be using. Maybe not for the next video because it's going to take a learning curve. But I figured it out. I learned it. And I will see you guys in a few. I'm deciding on which one I want to do. I might want to do a 420. The Superman missiles thing I love. But I think I need to get some political stories in. This is a political channel after all, so I'll see you guys shortly. And thank you for indulging me on this conversation. I see these type of conversations all the time that I like to either retort or respond to. I have a channel now, so I can do it if I want to. Nobody has to watch. I can do it in a fucking empty farce if I want. But that's my pushback against Chomsky on this one. I'm okay with it. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you guys shortly. Bye-bye.